The Panchen Lama and the 16th Dalai Lama climbed aboard the submarine on a shug-tree ridge amid camera flashes, blessings, and all sorts of metaphysical assertions. "We'll be back in 3 shakes of a yak's tail," promised the Panchen Lama as he was handed a sleeping 17th Dalai Lama by monks standing on the tops of ladders propped up against the submarine. "We work it out," said the 16th Dalai Lama. As the ladders were taken away, the hatch closed and the crane on the articulated lorry swung the submarine over to the vision lake. The 16th Dalai Lama was seen waving and grinning at a porthole. Then the submarine was lowered into the lake where it submerged and disappeared from view. All that was left of the 3 lamas were bubbles on the surface of the vision lake. Many said it was the single most important underwater voyage in the history of Tibetan Buddhism. Eventually everyone took their seats and waited. Time passed. Edgar was called away to his office to talk with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister wondered if Edgar would consider returning some of the money the Church of England had foolishly handed over to him. Edgar laughed. He laughed like this. Ah-ooh, ah-ooh. Then he said that unfortunately common decency prevented him from doing such a thing, and it was impossible. The Prime Minister said he understood, and the 2 of them left Edgar's office. Back in the main lobby, Edgar told jokes and showed his guests a number of metaphysical bets he particularly liked. One of these bets was the bet taken in the Jerusalem betting shop a week before for £500 that Yahweh is too sacred to pronounce aloud. Edgar read out that bet at least 100 times. He loved it. At 12 o'clock, the little bowls of peanuts were completely empty, and people were banging on the tables, demanding something to eat. Edgar got up and walked to a microphone in the very centre of the lobby. He tapped the microphone a few times, coughed, and said this. "Aloha! Metaphysical speculations are a waste of time. Mankind simply can't afford them. Metaphysics is the great, inane human activity. I have spent my life trying to show that to be the case. Hardly anyone has paid any attention at all. There you go. What did I expect? I will keep trying, ladies and gentlemen, although I get very depressed about the whole thing. I honestly believe that the only time when metaphysical speculation could ever be morally justified is when we are no longer faced with pressing problems. Don't do metaphysics, I say, until life has become a great big bowl of cherries. Only when everything is just dandy should we even begin to think of wasting our time with metaphysical things. Metaphysics are for utopias only, and even then we'd probably be better off without them." This much seems clear. We can't afford to play metaphysics yet. There are too many more pressing matters. Not long ago, 50 million human beings were killed when conscious electrical appliances, such as my friend here, went berserk. I blame metaphysicians for that whole catastrophe. As I blame, in a less direct way, metaphysicians for many of the other self-inflicted catastrophes that mankind has endured over the ages. 50 million human beings. Imagine that. You can't. It's too big a figure. It's not possible to grasp. Well, here is something else that's hard to believe. The same number of people who were killed in the Great Mania died in the last 2 years from hunger. I say this. Talking about God and afterlife, bickering over the nature of the absolute, spending years and years considering the final resting place of souls, spending one's life thinking how one is to achieve enlightenment and so on, indulging in the pointless pursuit of metaphysics, while 50 million people die for lack of food every 2 years is obscene. I have invited you all here tonight to announce that I, as of 10 o'clock this morning, following intensive negotiations with some 32 countries, am the sole owner of all the major deserts of the world. That's right, all 40 million square kilometres. Nearly a quarter of the total landmass of this nutty planet. Scepticism Inc. now owns the Sahara, the Arabian Desert, the Iranian Desert, the Turanian Desert in Asia, the Thar Desert in India, the Taklamakan Desert in Mongolia, and the Gobi Desert in China. The North American Desert covering parts of the southwest of the US and northwest Mexico, the Atacama Desert dividing the Andes from the Pacific Ocean, the Patagonian Desert in Argentina, and the Namib and Kalahari Deserts in southwestern Africa. Not forgetting, of course, the great Australian outback. I own the lot, 40 million square kilometres. That's more than can be properly imagined. I'm told I now own, among other things, the town of Calamar. It's situated in the Atacama Desert, in what was, before 10 o'clock this morning, part of Chile. I've never been to Calamar. Maybe I never will. There's only one thing I know about Calamar, and I think it's quite a remarkable thing, which I will now share with you all. It hasn't rained in Calamar for over 500 years. Soon, we here at Scepticism Inc. will begin work on the first stage of our plan to turn these 40 million square kilometres of sand into high-yield farmland. Our calculations show that this will roughly triple food production on this planet from 4,020 million metric tons to 12,000 million metric tons, enough to end hunger altogether. Our goal, as always, is this: the least pain and the longest life possible, for as many as possible. We at Scepticism Inc. could, of course, with the ridiculous funds at our disposal, do just about anything we please. We could build a cathedral on the moon if we were nutty enough, and I hear that the Holy Church of Christ in Alabama is already saving for such a monstrosity. We could, if we wanted, to buy up several times over the south of France, as George Mills Jr. did. That was silly and pointless. George Mills Jr. invented the infinity chip. For me, that makes him the most gifted man ever, and the closest thing to God there probably is, but he was still an asshole. He squandered his wealth on himself and his countless, identically named wives. He did nothing to help his fellow human beings. Some will call our attempt to turn the desert into farmland nothing more than a sensational act of self-publicity. This is perfectly true. I would want nothing more than for future history books to read something like this. In the early 21st century, a company founded by a man named Edgar Malroy took metaphysical bets and with the stupendous proceeds turned all the deserts in the world into farmland and wiped starvation from the face of the earth. That would be just fine by me. Others will say it is the work of a philanthropist. I like to think of it more as a conscious redirection of assets, a victory of common sense over madness, of the physical over the metaphysical, of the pressing over the irrelevant. What I hear some of you say of overpopulation, well, every year 20 stars like our sun are born within the Milky Way galaxy alone. We really ought to get out more. What begins now, the turning of desert into farmland, will not lead to a new Jerusalem. I am not about to create a new Eden, a heaven on earth. What we envision doesn't come close to such a corny, outlandish, nutty fantasy. Ours is a more modest goal. There will still be, no doubt, injustice, crime, death, and sorrow when we are finished. But at least 50 million people will not perish for lack of food every 2 years. This is a modest goal when you think about it. It won't save people's souls for all eternity. It won't make us one with God, or let us reach nirvana, or enlightenment, or anything so grand. It just saves an incomprehensible number of people's lives. It is the least we can do. Thank you, and aloha. There was an outburst of clapping and cheering. Then the heads of state and shareholders promptly slipped out of the main lobby of Skeptic Tower to find any sort of restaurant that was open that late at night. In no time, the only people left in the main lobby besides Edgar, myself and Scepticism Inc. employees, who were picking up empty glasses and peanut shells, were a few nuts who wanted terribly for Edgar to take their money off them. Edgar took their money, looking more depressed about it than ever, and then went straight to bed.